everyone, and welcome. Today I have with me Barrett Haar, who is our Director of Addiction and Mental Health Services for Feinberg Consulting. So welcome, Barrett.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We're very excited to have you and have you share your expertise with us today. But to start, would you give us a little bit of background about your experience in this field and then within the company?
Absolutely. So this is actually a bit of a second career shift for me. So my first 20 years, I spent working with adolescents and emerging adults and in the education world. And so once I started seeing the struggles that they were having and the ways in which their families were navigating things, I really wanted to make the shift towards mental health and wellness for our kids. So that's sort of how we ended up this way, and helping families find the right resources for their loved ones who are struggling has sort of become a big passion, because it's not something that we all know how to do naturally as parents. They don't come with instruction booklets, and if so, they wouldn't read them either. So, helping families to navigate that is something that, using that background in understanding adolescents and young adults, is something that really brings a nice skill set to this.
Well, that's great. And that is something really important that we're going to be talking about today, given the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, that we've seen a huge surge in people, adults, young adults, kids that need support in mental health. And so I'm wondering, from your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that adolescents are faced with because of the pandemic? And I'm talking, obviously we know all of the medical risks that comes with the virus and all of that, but what are maybe some of the not as obvious challenges that parents have been faced with during this past year?
So I think the first thing you have to know is sort of what's happening with the adolescent's brain at this time. And so in a pre-COVID world, a normal situation, adolescents are making the shift from being family-centric to their peers having more influence on them. And so with teens being stuck at home and not having that opportunity, there's some delayed development that's happening, in that they're not separating from their parents as much. They're not relying on really forming their identity. Who are they? Who are they not? And so those pieces are going to be an interesting thing that we're going to see in teens, that whereas we may think that, well, when I was 16, I was doing X, Y, or Z, this generation of teens may be hitting some of those milestones later, because they literally haven't had the opportunity to be with their peers in person and to have some of those experiences and to develop those thoughts and those approaches, opinions. And so, being in this bubble has been a unique thing. And then also, unfortunately, I think their social skills are really going to be lacking, right? We were talking about the tech generation before and how everything's done on the computers or on their phones, and they don't know how to have conversations anymore. Well, we just took them out of that for a whole other year. And so I think we're going to see an enhanced level of social anxiety for our teens and our young adults when they do begin to emerge from COVID, whether that's something as simple as ordering at a restaurant and having to state your needs and not being able to pre-craft it, edit it, and send it, out in whatever way. Those informal conversations are going to be harder for these teens as they begin to interact more and more with each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And do you think these issues, even though right now it seems like short term, I know it's important for us to look on a grand scale of how is this really going to impact them long term and potentially for the rest of their lives?
There's a lot of different areas that this can impact them, and that part of it, we really just have to be willing to suspend that timeline we have in our head for them, because a lot of people have talked about school loss and social loss, and we have to catch them all up. And the reality is that a lot of those are social constructs. They're not actual things that, right? A child has to graduate from high school at 17 and go to college at 18 or whatever it may be. That we've all been in this strange situation that none of us have ever lived through, right? None of us have lived through a pandemic. And so giving ourselves and our children the grace to say, we're just going to figure out what we need and be real about things as we begin to emerge from this, as more and more people are vaccinated, as we have a better hold on things. One of the critical pieces is going to be not going from 0 to 60, right? And having been at home and isolated and not doing all of the extracurriculars, to picking them all back up, because that's going to create a whole level of stress. that's not really necessarily warranted or healthy. Rushing them back into any situations, I think we're just going to have to be kind and gentle with people and recognize that there are simple little things that people won't even think about, like the background noise that we're used to in a school setting when we've been in school every day, whether it's the footsteps down the hall, how loud it can be at passing period. Our kids have been in their bedrooms with their headphones on for the last year. And so focusing may be a challenge for a bit as we reacclimate. So we're just going to really have to understand that this is new territory, just like entering the pandemic was new territory. There's going to be some exiting the pandemic that's going to have to be new territory, and it's not going to flip like a light switch back to life pre-COVID.
Do you have any tips for how parents can really support their kids during this time?
I think one of the biggest things to do is to find and limit your data consumption, which I know sounds silly, especially because we're all home. But one of the things that all of our children, no matter their age, feed off of is how we as parents are doing. And if we are compulsively checking the news, checking the COVID stats, talking about it constantly, then we are bringing that hyper awareness to them. And although it's important to be informed, it's also important to have responsible consumption of it and not to fall into the dismissive camp or the fear-mongering camp. And so finding that middle ground for yourself where you and your family can say, this is what we're okay with. And we can accept that this family may have different standards or that family may have different rules, but these are the ones that we're comfortable with, and find ones that are manageable for your family situation. Every family is going to make different rules based on what their needs are. And I think it's really important to not judge other families for their rules and regulations, because we don't really understand who has pre-existing conditions in their home, or maybe caring for a loved one, or may have other extenuating circumstances. A big thing is also to validate your children's experiences. When they're having a hard day and they're telling you that their world is over and that, this is just the worst thing that's ever happened, oftentimes parents are quick to dismiss and say, like, okay, really, you're in your house, you're safe, whatever it may be. But the reality is, in their experience and the way they've experienced the world, this really is a huge deal for them. And to validate and say, you know what, it is frustrating that you can't go out and see your friends right now, or whatever it may be, to really just try and see it from their perspective and really listen and be there with them, as opposed to trying to minimize it. You don't have to say, no, everything's fine. You don't have to find some other happy place and try and convince them out of it. Everyone's struggling, and that's okay. And then one of the other things is to really keep an eye on those red flags, because for some kids, this isolation really has pushed them to a place that is unhealthy, whether that's with their dependence on screens, if they're isolating in their rooms, on screens all day long and not interacting, right? We all have those days where we want to just sort of check out, and that's okay, but it's when it's becoming a pattern. Are their eating habits changing? Are their hygiene habits changing? And keeping an eye on that to make sure that their mental health is being managed in this time, and that it's keeping it at a safe level, where we're all having some level of struggle 13 months into this. But making sure that we're all safe and healthy at the same time.
Definitely. And say a parent is going through this with their child, but their child's really resistant to opening up to them, and they are noticing these red flags, but they're just really not sure what to do. What do you think are some resources available for parents that are going through that?
So I know that all of the school districts right now have an extra focus on social emotional health, and you can reach out to your school counselors to check in with them, especially if your kid is struggling and managing their schoolwork, turning things in, right? Some kids who were A students before are really struggling now. And so let them know that your kid is struggling if you're seeing specific behaviors. You can always also try and find a time to check in with your kid and engage them in things that meet them where they are, right? If it's that they're gaming, okay, show me about this game. I want to learn what you're playing. Teach me how to play, as opposed to trying to pull them out or shame them for doing it. meet them where they are, find out what's interesting about it. Are you meeting people about it? What are your favorite things? If possible, trying to get out of the house. Hey, will you go for a walk with me? Even if it's down the block and back, it doesn't have to be some long, vigorous physical activity, but finding time to do something different together. Oftentimes where you're not having to have this heart-to-heart conversation, but you're just there parallel with each other in presence. Doing that. And then of course, if you have questions or concerns, if your radar is going off that something really feels like it's a concern, you can always check with your child's pediatrician and talk about what options are there, consult a local therapist, and reach out to companies like ours who can help assess if there is something that is actionable and needs more support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for giving us those tips. And now I'm wondering too, when it comes to the parents themselves, because obviously it's important for them to notice those things about their children and be as supportive as they can. But when a lot of people right now are running on empty, I'm sure it's challenging, and I'm speaking from my own experience, it's challenging to fully be there for others when we're struggling ourselves. So are there any tips or resources that you would say for parents themselves to take that time to support their own mental health and ease their own anxiety?
So I think, we've always heard put on the oxygen mask for yourself before you put it on the person sitting next to you. And it's really hard as parents to do that. One, just because we care so much, but two, often it feels like, well, if I could get this done, then I could put and take a break, right? Then I could do this, that, or the other. But realistically, we're human beings, not human doings. And so we need to give ourselves that space and time to do that. So as much as it feels counterproductive to think about taking that time to go for the walk, it's really important to demonstrate that for our children and for ourselves, that we can do those things and take the time, because we can't ask anyone to do something we're not doing for ourselves. So if we're constantly checking out and just kicking back at the end of the day and not cooking, getting takeout, whatever it is, we can make a family initiative to do something and ask, depending on the age of your kids, it's okay to say, hey, I want to work on this. Will you help hold me accountable? Finding time to call a friend, go for a walk with a friend safely outdoors, and do that. Don't hesitate to seek therapy or help for yourself if you need someone to process through. Make sure that there's time that you're connecting with friends or your loved ones, your partners, so that you do have an opportunity. And then also just being kind and gentle with yourself. Again, just like our teens have never lived through this, neither have we. We've not lived through a pandemic, and we've also not been parents through a pandemic. So those two things together create a perfect storm. And so finding that opportunity to give ourselves some space, give ourselves some kindness, and to take care of our mind and our bodies are really some of the critical things that we can be doing to help ourselves and to help each other in times like this.
That's huge. And I really love that last part you said, is that space and that kindness and forgiveness. Because something else that you had said earlier about often our kids are on these strict timelines, like, yes, you need to achieve this by this age, and then you do this X, Y, and Z next. And we're really, I think what this pandemic has shown a lot of people is that it doesn't need to be that way. The way that we were running before wasn't necessarily helpful for anyone. So it's okay to look at life and look at things differently, because we are humans and we're just trying to do our best every day and figure this out as we go. So it's okay if, certain ththings are postponed or they're not getting to this point at this age. It's all okay. There's no rule book that we need to go by. Because for parenting in general before the pandemic, yeah, there's no rule book. We don't know. Most days it's a hard thing to deal with on what's the right thing to do next in addition to the pandemic. So I think that's really excellent advice.
Well, part of it is also not living vicariously through your kids, which is tricky, right? Especially thinking about adolescents. They're missing homecoming and prom and maybe driver's ed or sports seasons, whatever that may be. oftentimes for parents, those are such formative memories for us that we look forward to them for our children. And then it feels like a loss that our kid didn't get homecoming or prom or this traditional graduation ritual. And we were making those stories up, right? We were imagining our kid taking the picture on the stairs for prom. But truthfully, some of these kids are happier without it and are doing better with a decreased pressure in some of those social things. And so really taking the lead of your kid and recognizing that there's nothing truthfully wrong with this. It's different, and helping your kids to be resilient and to roll with changes in life that are out of our control, right? Because this is truthfully, a lot of this is out of our control. And the more we try and fight and control this, the harder it is for us. Whereas if we can just be flexible and, accept what it is and navigate around that and with it, then we're going to be much more fulfilled, much more peaceful, and really develop that sense of resilience for ourselves and our kids. So I think one of the things parents have to do is really give themselves that space to reflect. As we've been coming out of COVID, right? What was life like when we all heard COVID was hitting, right? We're like, oh, we're just going to shut down for 3 weeks. And that seemed crazy and unimaginable. And okay, it was going to be a pause, and then life was going to go back to normal. We've now had 13 months of being home, doing things differently, and stopping and really looking and saying, well, what was actually better for us? What did we really miss? And then to consciously bring back the things that brought value to your life, but also to be comfortable saying no to the things that weren't, right? One of the things I don't miss is driving carpool, right? That, getting stuck in traffic, stressing about time, all of those things. So is there a way that piece that's such a normal part of life that we can reconfigure things in a way that's different? For those families who were taking their kids to 5 different sports or academic tutors, okay, well, did your kids' grades really suffer? Did they discover that they really like this other thing? Do you have to pick it all back up just because some kids are? Or can you say, you know what, we've really discovered that quieter time is awesome for us, and that we would rather eat dinner together as a family and be on a recreational team as opposed to a competitive team, because of the value that it brings to your family. So really figuring out what's worked and what hasn't, and going back with intention, because we had this amazing opportunity to really take a pause and not necessarily be caught up in that rat race of what we're doing, but to really look and see, okay, so as we begin to emerge from this, what do we want? What are the lessons we learned, and how do we take those moving forward? Versus what do we think we have to do, and how we navigate the world.
That's so important. And I know for myself, I've been reflecting on that a lot, as well as I'm sure most people have. And, as challenging as it is now, the way that life was running before, I have a hard time, thinking about how could I ever go back to how it was before.
It's interesting. Everybody has a different experience, right? I've got 2 teens. One of them is very extroverted, deals with ADHD, struggled early on in the pandemic, was really not getting their schoolwork done, where academics are normally really easy for them. And this has been really hard. And so for them, they're really looking forward to being back with their peers in person when it's safe. But my older one, where academics are a bit harder, is thriving. Their grades have gone through the roof. They've gotten involved in youth group and doing different things virtually and really come out of their shell. And so to sort of give space for those people who say, oh, this was wonderful, right? I really loved it. For once, the introverts are winning, right? They're getting their time at home with their books and their videos, and not having to have all these, small talk conversations, but then also recognizing that for those extroverts, this has been exceptionally hard. Mm-hmm. And so, giving space to everyone's experience and honoring that, and sort of coming together. And this is where we're learning again and again that it really does take a village.
Thank you, Berit, again for joining us today and for sharing your expertise and knowledge on this topic. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Look forward to the next time we can do it again.